Today, we're really zeroing in, cutting through all the noise to focus on just one single political exchange.
Yeah, a really high-tension one.
It's kind of a masterclass, actually, in communication strategy when you're really under fire.
Exactly. We're digging into that recent interview on CNN's The Source. You know, the one between Kaitlan Collins and Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem?
Right.
And our mission really is to unpack the rhetorical toolkit. How does a top cabinet official navigate things when they're pinned down, absolutely pinned down, on endorsing some, let's say, politically explosive language used by their own team?
And you really need the context here, the pressure cooker situation. Secretary Noem, she wasn't initially there to talk politics, was she?
No, not at all. The plan was operational updates. You know, the federal investigation into that deadly shooting at the Immigration and Customs Enforcement Facility, the ICE facility in Dallas.
So a serious security briefing, essentially.
Supposedly. But that neutral ground, it just evaporated almost instantly.
Because the backdrop was already pretty intense.
Oh, absolutely. The atmosphere was thick. Just before this interview, President Trump had reacted to the Dallas attack. He publicly denounced radical left terrorists.
Sure. Okay, so that already set a very high political temperature.
Extremely high. But even that remark, as intense as it was, didn't quite cross the line we're talking about today.
Ah, right. That came next.
Yeah.
From a top White House aide, wasn't it? Stephen Miller.
That's the one.
Yeah.
Deputy Chief of Staff Stephen Miller. He pushed the language, well, past what you might call the point of no return.
With that specific statement.
Characterizing the entire Democratic Party, the entire party, as a domestic extremist organization.
Wow. Okay.
That phrase, that specific phrase, is what just detonates the whole exchange we're looking at.
Because it's not just name-calling.
Not at all. We're not talking about calling them bad or wrong or even just radical in a general political sense. This is different.
How so?
This is using the very specific legal and institutional language, the kind of terminology often reserved for groups that Homeland Security itself is actually tasked with monitoring, you know, for threats to the homeland.
It completely changes the stakes then.
Massively. It's like, imagine the difference between your boss saying, we've got a serious internal issue, versus saying, right, we are officially declaring this a national security event.
Okay, yeah.
The second one demands mobilization, carries huge institutional liability. It's not just talk.
And the choice of that phrase, domestic extremist organization, that was an accidental, presumably?
Oh, highly deliberate, I'd say. Miller didn't just, toss out a political insult. He was trying to redefine the entire political opposition as a national security threat.
Which puts someone like the head of DHS in an impossible position.
Exactly. It forces every senior security official, especially a head of DHS, Secretary Noem in this case, to either agree that a major American political party now falls under their security mandate or, well, reject the whole idea publicly.
Right. So let's get into it. How did Secretary Noem handle that direct challenge? Collins didn't waste any time there.
No, straight to the point. Collins asked her directly, as the Secretary of Homeland Security, do you agree with Stephen Miller's characterization of the Democratic Party? A yes or no question, essentially.
And this is where the tightrope walk begins.
You can almost see it in the source material, yeah. Noem knew, she must have known, she couldn't just say yes.
Why not? What's the risk there?
Saying yes would invite just unprecedented institutional scrutiny, potential political paralysis for DHS itself. Imagine the implications.
Okay. But she couldn't just say no either.
Well, saying no flat out would undermine a key narrative coming from the White House. It would look like she was contradicting them directly on this framing of the opposition.
So trapped, what did she do?
She executed a classic pivot, a textbook move, really.
Okay.
She refused repeatedly to answer the classification question directly. She would not use that specific term, domestic extremist organization, for the Democratic Party.
But she didn't just stay silent. She shifted the focus.
Immediately. She pivoted away from classifying the political party itself and instead pivoted towards classifying their perceived, well, their actions and who they support.
Okay, so attack the policies, not the party label directly.
Kind of. Her argument became that Democrats are taking extreme positions and, crucially, that they are supporting radical criminal organizations.
And she didn't just leave it vague, did she? She named specific groups.
Yes, and this is key. She brought up MS-13 and Tren de Aragua. Very specific, high-profile criminal groups.
Okay, MS-13, Tren de Aragua. Oh. Why those groups? From a strategic communication view, what does that achieve?
Well, think about it. Those are transnational criminal organizations, right? primarily known for drug trafficking, human trafficking, horrific violence. They aren't usually framed as domestic terrorist groups aiming for political violence within the U.S., like some other groups DHS might track.
Right, they're seen more as, well, criminal threats, often linked to border issues.
Precisely. And that's the rhetorical brilliance, if you want to call it that, of the deflection. By naming MS-13 and Tren de Aragua, Noem changes the subject entirely.
How's that?
She shifts it from a political question, should DHS classify the opposition party, to a security question everyone agrees on. Are we concerned about violent drug cartels?
Oh, I see. It moves the conversation on a ground that's firmly within the DHS mandate.
Exactly, and carries basically zero political risk for her to condemn those groups. Everyone agrees they're bad.
So she gets to sound tough, invoke fear, talk about extremism.
Without actually using Miller's classification for the Democrats. She substitutes a universally condemned criminal target for the controversial political one. She specifically said Democrats certainly have seen Democrats out there take extreme positions and support radical criminal organizations.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense strategically. But Collins didn't just let her get away with that pivot, did she?
No way. The source material shows Collins was incredibly persistent. Relentless, really.
She kept coming back to Miller's specific phrase.
Multiple times. The notes say at least 3 separate attempts to get Noem to just say yes or no to Miller's exact terminology. Domestic extremist organization.
That creates enormous pressure on the secretary.
Absolutely. And Noem's evasion wasn't just dodging. She actually tried to flip the script.
How does she do that?
Instead of answering the classification question, she started demanding that Democrats should be the ones to denounce these criminals, meaning MS-13 and Tren de Aragua.
Wow. That's quite a move. Political jujitsu almost.
It really is, because think, if she answers Collins directly, she loses either politically or institutionally, as we discussed.
Right.
If she just deflects without attacking back, she looks weak or evasive.
But by demanding the opposition, denounce the group she brought up.
Exactly. She reframes the whole thing. It's no longer about her unwillingness to use Miller's words. Suddenly, it's about the Democrats' supposed moral failure to condemn violent criminals. She turns defense into offense.
So we had this standoff. Collins pushing for domestic extremist organization, Noem refusing, demanding denunciations instead. How did it finally resolve? Did Noem give a final answer?
She held her ground on the main point. She refused to cross that line, never used Miller's exact phrasing for the party.
A Bashir, it's a bet.
But she did give them the political cover they likely wanted. She explicitly characterized the Democrats' views as extreme.
Ah, the views, not the organization itself.
Right. And she added that their views don't align with the American people at all. Strong political language, just not the official classification.
Okay, let's pause on that distinction because it feels critical. Why is extreme okay for her to say, but domestic extremist organization is the absolute red line? If the goal is just firing up the base, wouldn't they want the full endorsement of Miller's term? Why does this precise wording matter so much inside the government?
It matters hugely because of institutional liability and function. Extreme is political rhetoric, pure opinion. It's subjective, you can argue about it, but it doesn't trigger specific government protocols. Domestic extremist organization, however, that's different. That term is potentially tethered to the actual machinery of the Department of Homeland Security.
You mean if she agreed to it, it would have actual consequences for DHS operations?
Potentially, yes. If the Secretary of DHS agrees that a major political party is an extremist organization, that immediately raises profound, difficult questions.
Like what? What are the practical differences?
Well, think about it. Does DHS then need to allocate resources differently? Does it change intelligence gathering priorities, surveillance protocols? Do you start monitoring Democratic campaign activities or elected officials under that banner?
Oh, wow. Yeah, that would be a political firestorm.
An unmanageable one. It could paralyze the agency. It would fundamentally undermine public trust, whatever trust remains in DHS's nonpartisan national security role. You'd essentially be asking the department to potentially turn its counterterrorism mission against the legitimate political opposition.
So refusing the specific designation of organization was about protecting the institution itself.
Exactly, or at least protecting the perception of its institutional integrity. It maintains that crucial distinction, however thin it might seem sometimes, between political criticism and an official security threat designation.
But by still calling their views extreme.
She successfully endorsed the spirit of Miller's attack. She gave the political signal without incurring the massive institutional and legal risk. It's a very precise, very calculated linguistic sidestep.
Okay, so connecting this specific exchange to the bigger picture, the sources point out that critics see Miller's comments and this whole rhetorical line as a dangerous escalation, right? Targeting political opponents in a new way.
Absolutely. And this interview, this specific back and forth with Noem, wasn't just some random occurrence. The source material identifies it as one of the most direct, maybe the most direct, public attempt by a cabinet official to grapple with Miller's comments, to address them, and also subtly to shape how they land.
It's like the moment where the really extreme rhetoric meets the reality of institutional responsibility.
That's a good way to put it. The rhetorical rubber meets the road. It arguably sets a kind of precedent, or at least tests the boundaries of what's considered acceptable political warfare from within the government apparatus.
So the administration pushes the limits with a phrase like domestic extremist organization.
And then they use a cabinet secretary, in this case the DHS secretary, to effectively test the institutional tolerance for that language. And Noem, through her careful refusal, basically defined the boundary.
Which is?
You can push the sentiment, the feeling of extremism, as hard as you want politically, but you cannot, or she at least was unwilling to, cross the line into applying an official security classification to a major political party.
And her tools for managing that boundary were those specific examples she used.
Right, those concrete, fear-inducing examples, MS-13, Tren de Aragua, they acted almost like a rhetorical shield. They let her justify the feeling of danger and extremism she wanted to project onto the Democrats.
Without ever having to apply the formal, risk-laden label of organization to them.
Exactly. Using transnational criminal threats to fend off a question about domestic political classification, it's really something when you break it down.
It's definitely not just a simple conversation. It feels much more like political risk management happening in real time, just disguised as dialogue.
I think that's right. Every word choice seems weighed for its potential cost and its political benefit. And in this exchange, you really saw a top official trying to thread that needle, navigating between political loyalty to the White House line and the need for institutional self-preservation at DHS.
So wrapping up this deep dive, the key takeaway seems to be about that calculation. We saw the intense pressure on a DHS secretary to classify a major political party using very specific, loaded terminology.
And we saw her calculated refusal of that specific term, domestic extremist organization.
But crucially, she didn't just refuse. She countered that pressure by deploying these specific rhetorical tools, naming MS-13 and Tren de Aragua, to justify labeling Democrats' views as extreme, thereby satisfying some of the political demand.
Yeah, it really highlights that even in these incredibly heated political moments, that distinction, the one between a political attack, however harsh, and an official security designation, remains a critical red line. Maybe an increasingly thin one, but still a line that institutional actors seem very careful about crossing.
It definitely leaves a provocative thought for you, the listener, to consider as you see these debates unfold. When high-level officials face pressure to use specific classifications, labels that explicitly tie their political opponents to national security threats, how much can we actually learn just by analyzing the precise alternative language they choose instead?
Right. What does that carefully chosen sidestep tell us? And maybe more importantly, what are the potential long-term consequences for democratic norms, for institutional neutrality, when officials become skilled at using every verbal weapon short of a formal designation to blur that line between political opposition and a security threat? That calculated linguistic avoidance, it might reveal where the real power and perhaps the future danger in political language truly lies.
A really important question. And a great place to leave it. Thank you for diving deep with us today.
My pleasure.
We'll catch you next time.